Albert,
Hello.
congratulations on this series at the Continental that
Oh, thank
is
you.
ending really soon.
Yes, it is.
So, were you surprised or had any concerns about, the audience's reception of a world without John Wick?
No, I don't think I was surprised. I think that sometimes you look at things early on before it's released, like, whoa, is John Wick in it? It's like, oh God, you guys, it's the 70s. It's about the Continental, figure it out, But that was early on, and I think that the audience has come to it with open arms, and they're having a good time with it and know what it is.
Now, you directed a couple of episodes, and Chad directed 4 movies, and he set that bar pretty high. Um, how did you want to approach a project like this and make it your own and not, Chad's project?
Well, I think it starts with the 70s and the time period. And I did have some apprehension at first. I think that I wouldn't have done it if it took place in current times, because that's what Chad and Keanu are for. They do a marvelous job at it. That's not my job to take on in any way. The fact that it took place in the 70s, you have to reverse engineer everything. And that Chad had a talk with me and said, here are my influences. We want you to have your influences. And, he kind of blessed me to go do my thing. I don't think without that blessing I would have done it. It's just not worth it to go into something being controlled in a way by the studio or other producers. And he was really sweet about it. So what I found was that it was quite freeing and liberating. There were no real rules put on me, and I knew I had to establish a different path in the same city, or the same world. It had to fill up the same world, but you can create your own path. And there's plenty of examples of that being done with Tony Gilroy and Andor, John Favreau, Mandalorian, Noah Hawley with Fargo. So
It sounds like you're very fascinated with the 70s. What do you love about the 70s?
well, to me, it was the last decade of the so-called the end of innocence. Analog to digital. Digital started coming on in the 80s. Records, 8-track players, old TVs, like all this analog stuff that you do see in the John Wick film series, where they're using analog and digital, right? It's also the decade I was born in. It's also the decade that minorities started getting rights in America. There's also social reasons for me loving the 70s. It had a great run of television that it hasn't been surpassed yet, as far as representation in sitcoms and commercials. And it was a more the last of the freeing kind of spirit, I think. Even in cinema, some of the last great movies that was when it ended. Taxi Driver or French Connection or the Godfather films, like you can never make those movies nowadays. That was inherent to the 70s.
Tell us about working with the stunt team for this, because and correct me if I'm wrong. 8711 is a terrific, reputable stunt team in the John Wicks movies, and you got a chance. I want to say you got a chance to work with them in this series.
Oh yeah, I mean, Chad Stahelski, blessed Larnell Stovall, our action unit director, our action coordinator, and 8711, all those guys and women came from the John Wick. They've either been in the films or were working behind the scenes. So that was well taken care of. And they're exciting to work with because you don't have to look over your shoulder. They have stunt viz. They're showing you, you show them an environment, they come back with ideas, you start counterpunching with ideas, shorten it, lengthen it, and they know what they're doing. And they're very creative. And they're part of this new school of stunt men and women that don't rest on just like, walking in with their cowboy buckle and saying, well, we're going to flip that horse, and you have to trust them.
One last thing before I let you go, Albert, is 3 episodes. Why was that a perfect length, and did you wish you could have done more?
I would say it is the perfect length because you're giving the audience 3 movies. Originally, they had thoughts of doing 10 episodes. And I think just the beginnings of telling the story of how Winston gained control of that hotel with Sharon required, whatever, 4.5 hours of telling. If you were to do 10 episodes, this is what the audience needs to know. It's like we all kind of know that there's filler episodes in those series. In the middle kind of lags. It's because they're treading water at that point. We didn't want to tread water. We wanted to be lean and mean, and we wanted to give them feature length quality and feature length running time to tell this story. Now, whether or not that story is going to move forward into other seasons, that's up to people that are far more powerful than me. But that was our job. Our job was to tell the story of how they got that hotel.
Most excellent. Well, I'm out of time, but if only the walls of the Continental could talk. I mean, I could get more stories out of you. But thank you very much, Albert, and it's
Thank
going to be an
you.
exciting conclusion.
And I
Thank you.
love your background.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it.